of cruel.
Let the heavens rage!
Ooh, I don't know, guys. Something about that ad really just gets the heart beating. And I don't know if it's the ad or, I don't know, I feel like something's like watching me. Somebody's staring. Ah! Oh, God! Oh, no, it's just my old crappy desk chair. It's okay. It did freak me out a little bit, though. Ah! Oh, God. Oh, it's just the default ward, guys. It's okay. It's just an old crappy desk chair and a default ward. But I don't have to worry about either of those anymore because I've got a great brand new SMITE Maxonomic chair. So that solves the chair problem, but Dave, how does that solve my default ward problem? I'm going in game, I'm looking like a fool when I place down wards. Well, you get one of these good-looking chairs, you get a good-looking ward in-game, so both of my issues now gone. I do have to move that back to my closet later on, though. Still Dolson here, though, aggro with me to talk about set number 2 of the day. Glad you were with me on the desk to finally witness one of the great ads there.
Yeah, let me tell you, it's a little bit different being on the field as opposed to watching from the stands when it comes to one of these ad reads, for sure. I thought that the default ward was really the Illuminati, aka Big Chair, coming to take us down, but it turns out
I can see the memes now.
Perfect. Way to give out our affiliations, Dave, to Illuminati.
For free. But we're here to talk about the second set we have to round out the day on Saturday. Sanguine up against eUnited. I was talking to Mifflin about it. I think these are two teams not in desperate need, but starting to get to that territory of really needing one. eUnited maybe more so than Sanguine, but Sanguine now needing to turn things around after a stellar Phase 1 from themselves. eUnited still yet to win, as you'll see reflected here in the standing. So before we dive into team-specific talk, Aggro, who do you think maybe needs a win a little bit more here between eUnited and Sanguine?
I think it's a little bit it's pretty demoralizing, to see a 0 in the win column there for eUnited if you're on that squad. So I would certainly vote eUnited in that aspect because Sanguine, despite having a tough doubleheader last week and going 0-2 in those 2 games, it was against 2 of the best teams in the entire league. This is a team that still has to find their footing on how they want to adjust to meta changes in the SPL. I mean, I think we kind of forget that as good as these guys have been, they've only been here this year. This is their first year in the SPL for all 5 of these players. And so meta changes and how they act at this top level, whenever the meta is going to change, whenever big patches come through, that kind of stuff takes time. I'm not too worried about this Sanguine squad.
And some of the struggles they've had, I mean, it never hangs specifically on one player all the time. But, Panatom, not necessarily bad, but maybe a bit slower here in Phase 2. Not the stellar padded stats we saw from him, at least up to this point, that we saw in Phase number 1. How important do you think the jungle matchup is today? And talk to me a little bit about what you've seen from Panatom so far.
I think that one of the biggest changes that we've seen in the meta is how different your jungler picks are, right? It's a lot more Golden Blade picks. It's a lot more different styles of building and things like that are going to change the way that your jungler has to play. So Panatom struggling a little bit makes some sense to me because he's got to find a little bit of a new play style. Phase 1, he was playing a lot of ability-based junglers. Those aren't really in the meta right now, so he's got to be able to change up his play style and go with something a little bit different. He certainly struggled in Phase number 2. There's no denying that, but I don't think it's anything as desperate as we've got to try and see what we can do to play around him. Panatom will be fine. These guys grind the game nonstop. They're doing a whole lot of playing. I think that they'll find their way to enable Panatom on some different picks. They've just got to find a way to either bring teams to a meta that Sanguine themselves can try and develop, or try to find a way to assimilate into the established meta a little bit better.
That's been the overall conversation for a lot of the teams so far. Some have obviously figured out this meta quickly, some yet to do so. Sanguine maybe somewhere in between of those two. Continue that thread, though, with me a little bit here, Ryan. We're overlooking at eUnited, and actually maybe kind of the opposite, maybe similar degrees opposite of Panatom. Scream has started off a little bit better from what we saw from him in phase number 1. Certainly hasn't been clean from this eUnited squad. These guys haven't won a game just yet. But if you're looking for a bright point amongst a team that's still, figuring out a role swap and a new addition to that hunter role, Scream is maybe a good place to look for some solid, some concrete execution maybe moving forward.
I think it's where eUnited has to find that execution moving forward because, as I've said, I've been on a lot of the United games so far this phase. I've casted a lot of those games, and it just feels like the way that Guy J and Snoopy are going to learn this duo lane, it's going to take them some time. It's been a pretty slow start for those two. And Scream, I think, maybe undeservingly, just has a lot of pressure on his shoulders because he has been so successful in his career, and he's been such a standout player. I mean, this guy has been the undisputed, in my mind, best NA jungler for years now. Really, Mask is the only one I think who can hold a candle to the resume of Scream over the past 4 or 5 years as far as North American junglers go. So you ask that leading up to this season, and you look at how this team is constructed, it's got to be a team where Scream can be a star for this team, and he just has not been doing that consistently enough. I mean, you look at what the other junglers have done in the SPL up until this point. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind now that at the very top of the leaderboard, Sam for Soccer is looking down on everybody among the jungler pool, but once upon a time, I mean, Scream was kind of gatekeeping that guy in terms of being one of the best junglers in the world. So I think that if eUnited are going to find any sort of success, in my mind, it really begins and ends with Scream.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there on that, Mark. Big shoes to fill, and they're his own this time around. We talked enough about Scream. I was able to talk to Scream, see how he's feeling going into this set. All right, guys, we're down here with Scream now, the jungler for eUnited, and they've got a big matchup against Sanguine, so we're going to be hearing his thoughts going into this big one. Scream, obviously a tough start to the phase for you guys, 0 for 3, but you took Ghost to 3 games. You have looked strong in some of those performances. Overall, how would you say the team has kind of reacted to the start here in phase 2?
Well, we didn't end in a great spot last phase, so it's like, we're not like, what's the word? We're not like scared of being 0-3,
right.
If that makes sense. There's 21 games in the split, so we have a lot of games to improve, but we also can't start the phase like 0-6 or anything. I think that'd be really bad for morale and overall standings,
right.
Of course. But go ahead.
I was gonna say I think that's the kind of the right way of looking at things. It's a long phase, but get some momentum going here sooner rather than later would be absolutely ideal. And kind of along that line, obviously Guy J coming in, Snoopy swapping over to support, kind of like doing these check-ins periodically kind of on that lane. How do you think the role swap and the new guy has been going for you guys? Have you seen some good progress there out of that lane?
Yeah, so the first initial weeks of it were actually pretty good. They were both really driven to learn at a SPL level for their roles. Snoopy's obviously new to support, and I think they'll only improve as time goes on. They had a pretty bad week last week, but we talked about it. But their first week was really good, I think, and I think that they have a lot of room to improve, and the more games I think they get in SPL, the better they'll look.
I don't think you're too far off on that one. And now maybe a little bit more focused on you. Jungle, I think kind of across the board is maybe, I don't want to overstep here, being regarded as potentially the most important role in the current meta. I know I did a check-in with Ghost, and they kind of jokingly ragged on Sam, Jungle, so strong at the moment. Is that something you tend to agree with? And if so, do you think that adds extra pressure on you to perform well in some of these games?
Jungle is definitely a lot more versatile than it was last split, mainly because you get pretty much the equal farm with like the mid laner. You're just more of like a impactful person on the map, and a lot of people have the opinion that jungle is just the most important role anyways, because they can make the most impact on a game through ganking or setting up map plays for buff invades, stuff like that. But I definitely think it's pretty good right now, and I also think it's a pretty flexible role right now. I think a lot of the items are in good spots. I think Golden Blade's in a fine spot now. And I still think there are ways of, or I still think there's a lot of things that have been unexplored still. So, you know, I'm trying to figure that stuff out.
And you've had a pretty good phase up to this point as well. Kept your team and gotten your team in a few of these sets. Kind of final thoughts going up against Sanguine. Admittedly, they've had a bit of a tough time to start off the phase as well. 1 and 2, they're negative in the win-loss column for the first time since entering the league in phase 1. Where do you see Sanguine right now? How do you rate them as an opponent? And where's your confidence going into the matchup?
I'm definitely confident. I'm confident going into a lot of matchups, but I don't know. I think maybe I don't want to say they're worse now, but you know, the first phase in the SPL can be really exciting for new players, and I think that might have had an impact on how they played. But I still think they're a really good team. I think the meta's changed since they've joined, so I think they might have some trouble adapting to the meta. We haven't really seen like any meta changes for them, so that could be one of the issues. But you know, I still think they're a good team. I respect playing against them, and I think that they'll be a challenge regardless.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an absolutely fun one to watch. Scream, thanks so much for sitting down with me, and best of luck.
Thank you.
Scream and the rest of eUnited hoping to exercise the demons of the 0 in the win column that they got up to this point. I've exercised the demons of the scary chair behind me on my bed. Back to the closet it goes, and back onto your screen comes Aggro to kind of finish breaking down what we've got here. Aggro going into the set. I may have spoken just a little bit too soon. There we go. I threw production through a loop there. I apologize, guys, on the back end of it. Do you like what you heard out of Scream, though, talking about Sanguine, sort of his take on where they are?
Yeah, I think that Scream has clearly matured a lot from his time in the SPL. I mean, you think back to Season 2 when he was underneath Pain to Beyond and that enemy team and how much he's really grown as a player during that time. I think that maybe if this cold streak was happening to Scream of Season 4 even, you know, when they won Worlds, I don't know if the mental would all be there for the kids. So I think that his ability to try and turn it around after a tough phase 1, as he said, and now a really either blazing hot or ice cold start to phase 2 for him personally is going to be really critical for this squad.
Ryan, I think we've gone back and forth a good bit on the breakdown between these two teams. Let's see what they actually select meta-wise going into this big game. You know, Sanguine needs to get some momentum going. eUnited hoping to see some growth out of that long lane that actually results in a win. A lot to look at there. Do you think that actually plays into picks and bans at all, Aggro? The not necessarily weakness, but the newness maybe of that long lane duo. Do you think you really have to sort of cater to them a little bit more in your pick ban phase, or do you really kind of stick with the meta and give some confidence to the two guys building together?
Well, I think that it does, but only in the sense that you had it right the first time, is that the newness has translated into weakness for this eUnited draft or for this eUnited squad, and so that will absolutely play into the drafting phase. I mean, it might mean that you need to reach a little bit higher for something, one of the few picks that Guy J might be comfortable on or Snoopy might be comfortable on so far here at the SPL level. I mean, I'm sure that these guys have been practicing a ton of different picks behind closed doors, but just because of the shorter amount of time for this dual lane to be together, that means they've naturally found less picks that work well because of less practice time. So it can affect your picks and bans. I think we've seen eUnited really prioritize getting Snoopy's God pretty early, more often than not in these drafts, which is not unique to eUnited. A lot of supports are getting their gods pretty early because they're strong right now. I mean, gods like Cthulhu in eUnited sense, or Hercules or Yamoja, I mean, those are gods that are going to be prioritized pretty heavily no matter what team is playing.
And kind of on that vein, is actually an interesting point. I want to see where Sanguine respond to this one. Hercules, Cthulhu, both taken away. So whether or not Snoopy would have played the Cthulhu, moot point is eUnited are going to ban him out. Hercules also banned, but that does leave this Yamoja open. Aggro, Aphrodite as well, banned out to round things out. So this is going to be kind of a self-answering question now, I suppose. A good look at where eUnited stands in the meta and how much, I think, emphasis they need to give to Snoopy playing one of the most powerful gods in Yamoja is maybe the answer here. But also left open is this Persephone, and that's maybe where eUnited's priorities lie.
Yeah, I think that Persephone should be where their priorities lie because Shinto has shown that he's very comfortable on this pick. Yes. Hurwind has had one of the best track records on this selection despite only a few picks in his pocket on that. So I think that eUnited should be ecstatic they're able to get this Persephone locked in here for him. But Umoja being left open, I'd very much anticipate Rongyu going in that direction, because that River's Rebuke can cause that Persephone ult to lose a lot of value pretty quickly in some of these team fights, because that is a wall that will block that projectile, and that could cause those Grasp of Darknesses to be a little bit more awkward. So I'd be a little bit surprised, but yeah, that makes sense. Olorun, Umoja, two very strong picks here for Sanguine.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot to be in, kind of second pick with so many strong gods viable right now. Sanguine, I thought, not necessarily weird, but maybe unconventional. The Circuit ban obviously caters towards Scream, the Hercules ban, very strong Aphrodite as well, but you're leaving open so much. But I guess that's the benefit of being second ban and the second pick spot. You give away Persephone, but you get back an Olorun and a Umoja. Very strong to start off. Really, for both teams, now that eUnited have also added a Cupid into the mix, we've seen Cupid start to run away with some games, and a Cerberus as well has started to see some increased play.
Yeah, this is an interesting draft here for eUnited. It is crazy that Cupid is like top 4 picks right now, because that is something that I don't think I've ever seen at a competitive level in SMITE 7 years in. But he's just pretty strong, and I think that he works well up against the Umoja. You look at what has countered this pick in the past, it's been gods like a Willix who interact well with the 3 that really shut down this pick, and Cupid interacts well with shutting down Riptide. That seems to be a pretty consistent trend, is keeping Umoja from using mobility in the team fights, because you can't really stop the healing more than buying regular anti-heal. You can't stop the chain stuns, you can't stop the walls from going up. So you've got to try and find the interaction point kind of on that character. It seems like it's around that Riptide. The Cerberus is an interesting flex pick here. Last time we saw this for eUnited, it was for Variety, and he had a fantastic game on it in the solo lane. So until we see otherwise, I would anticipate that Cerberus going solo.
Is that a matchup into the Amaterasu that you have some comfort with? We've seen Ama run away with some games. Cerberus is, again, to your point, had some great games as well. The passive maybe plays into a little bit of the healing Amaterasu is going to have. What does the solo lane, presumed solo lane matchup look like?
I think it's pretty even. I mean, both of these gods can get leads and be real bullies. Ama's a little bit more accustomed to that than someone like Cerberus. But Cerberus's main strength is that he can force an ultimate out with using his own Stygian Torment, and then set up for a pretty easy gank, because he's got really good gank setup with the slow and a long duration stun afterwards. So I think that it's one that is really primarily around team fighting. If one of these is going to get a lead, it's probably going to be the Ama. But even then, I don't know how hard you can really push it.
Oh, junglers beware here. 5 bans across both teams dedicated to the jungle. Does leave open Thor, though. 25%, quarter of the time pick ban, but a massive 86% win rate, aggro. So when we are seeing this Thor, however few and far between it is, he's winning the games more often than not.
And I love it against the Cerberus as well, because knock-up immunity is key up against this pick, because it stops Stygian Torment really in its tracks. Now you don't have to waste your purification beads every single time. I like this pickup here for Sanguine, but the Ymir pick is an interesting one here, likely for Snoopy, though Variety has played a lot of that in the past, and maybe even Scream could be pulling it out, though if I had to guess, it would be Wukong jungle Ymir support. The wall is good, but not great here for up against Sanguine. I think that you look at this Olorun pick, obviously he doesn't deal with the wall well, Umoja doesn't either. Yeah, I'm kind of talking myself into it. Ama can get blocked as well. I think that eUnited has a ton of CC here in the draft, but their damage is really unreliable. They don't have guaranteed easy poke damage from a distance. And so if Sanguine can just sort of steamroll these team fights and kind of blow past all the CC that eUnited has, I think that they'll be fine. But if eUnited get off to any sort of lead with this amount of crowd control that they have, I think their team comp's going to be very difficult to fight into.
And then Merlin to round out the draft for Shinto. Plenty of confirmable damage there. You said take away the Persephone from Shinto. Absolutely a strong point. But the Merlin there for Sanguine as well, I think is going to be a strong pivot point. Quick thoughts, aggro. One way or the other, or more dependent on the early game here for eUnited?
Yeah, I think it's pretty dependent on how well this Cupid Ymir lane does. I think that those two getting pressure is going to be pretty key. Like I said, I think if eUnited gets off to a 3-4K lead, 15 minutes in, they're going to be in a fantastic spot to win, because heavy CC drafts are great from ahead and can make comebacks, but when you have this little guaranteed damage, it gets a little bit scarier for me. So I'm looking at eUnited to try and get a lead and then snowball with how much crowd control.
eUnited looking to get their first win of the phase. Sanguine looking to get their second. Game number 1. Let's kick it off.
Thanks, Dolson and Aggro. Finch and Mifflin this time as we move on to eUnited up against Sanguine. Some interesting drafts here. Scream on the Sun Wukong into the jungle. We probably thought this Cerberus is going to end up over there for Variety. Persephone making it through here as well. What do you make, Mifflin, of this eUnited draft?
It's exactly as Aggro said, man. It's CC galore. And to speak to his point, I agree that a team with a heavy amount of CC with a lead is so much more potent. But when you fall behind, it's going to be much harder to play because what are you going to do? You're going to stun someone and set up for no damage from behind? But with a lead, everyone's going to be dealing damage. Snoopy, Gaijay, Hurrywin, Scream, every single piece of the puzzle should come together. But even then, the early game, I would lean towards Sanguine just because they have Panatom on this Thor. Just because Rongyu's playing this Yamoja, there should be plenty of pressure on the map. eUnited's got a tough hill to climb up if they want to find a lead in the early.
No, it's not going to be easy. My eyes are really going to be on Panatom in particular, and even Rongyu, as you said, on this Yamoja, man. I really do think that banning away that many junglers, but leaving Thor up is a pretty scary prospect. He can single-handedly control this phase of the game as Snoopy takes all kinds of free damage. Apparently, Olaron and Yamoja still plenty to worry about in terms of dual lane pressure. Yeah, and Amir Cupid, they might have to hold that.
Yeah, I mean, Yamoja, anybody, really. I mean, we could do this all day. Yamoja plus anything is going to get pressure against literally anyone besides maybe an Izanami, and that's just the strength of it. It's not just lane pressure. Rongyu's bringing kill potential. If you get hit by a stun at this point, you might lose your life.
Panatom goes for an aggressive hammer, trying to hit both of them with the double tap, but he'll settle for plenty of good poke onto Hurrywin. This is already, I think here, Mifflin, a good way for this game to sort of start off for Sanguine, to give a chance for Rongyu and Netroid to get off to a good start, potentially get ahead. But there's Snoopy hitting the two-man freeze in the back of the Riptide. Doesn't get any relics off it, though, in the back end. But still, I mean, you can get this Olaron to the late game comfortably, allow Rongyu to rotate around the map with Shinto and Panatom, and that is how Sanguine makes their bread and butter in the early games a lot of the time.
But they have eUnited that is a fantastic way to shut down this Olaron. Sun Wukong can rotate over, and he doesn't really need to wait for the Somersault Cloud to hit his power spike for ganks. He's going to get plenty off of Master's Will, the Jinku Bang, 72 transformations that, if I'm eUnited, I'm looking for an early gank in this dual lane, but it seems like Sanguine's on the same page.
Yeah, it really feels like Panatom didn't want that. Rongyu puts down the good Riptide to make it way harder for Snoopy to get out, as Shinto has to use beads in the middle lane. He's been slowed, and Hurrywin is the one that finds first blood. Scream on the Sun Wukong refuses to play a jungler, making it look good.
But Shinto loses out on his beads as well there. If you thought it was already going to be hard, yeah, it's going to happen again and again. That's the strength of Sun Wukong jungle. It's just that he's got damage, he's got CC, and he's pretty easy to land, and he's got a ton of survivability the second he ticks on over to level 5. It's a god that can play fast and loose with its life because he's got so many outs. If he goes in, gets caught out, 72 transformation might just save his life.
Metroid has to use his beads as well. Rongyu steps up, so there is no more follow-up damage as Gaijay takes a little bit of damage in his own right in return. But you're so right, I think, when you talk about Wukong and how strong he can be in this phase of the game in particular. And I think that I really like his pairing with this Persephone, because Wukong is the kind of god that can do a lot of the work but rarely do all of it. And you could always count on Persephone to be able to provide some follow-up with Bone Rush or with those plants, with the Grasp of Death, and Hurrywin and Scream able to work together there for a pretty big kill on Shinto once they knew Panatom wasn't around.
I mean, I agree completely. Persephone brings this similar type of lane pressure that Thoth brings, and that Bone Rush or Hieroglyphic Assault are both going to hit you from outside of your own range. So if Hurrywin's able to find even a little bit of poke on the Shinto, or even just follow up with the Grasping Tendrils from the ultimate, it's going to be just so easy to set Scream up to continually find the pressure through mid lane. But even then, I still want eUnited not to focus all of their attention into that 3v3 in the center of the map. You have to address this Olaron. Netroid can't be allowed to free farm because he's the highest priority target on the map for Sanguine. If he's allowed to sit over there and the rest of the team falls behind elsewhere on the map, I'm sure Sanguine's feeling just fine with it.
Certainly. I mean, we've seen Shinto play well on this Merlin, even when he is a little bit behind. Snoopy does come topside onto this long lane, looking to see if he can lock down Netroid. Knows the beads aren't there, but there is the River's Rebuke being used to try and lock down Snoopy and the Sanctified Field, and this Amir has bit off more than he can chew, walking into double ultimates from the Sanguine duo lane, and Sanguine tied things up.
I just gotta imagine, what was the plan? But Panatom's got a plan. Guy J, lazy back. Gonna lose his life. That's tough.
Certainly tough. Ends up, though, going in favor of Sanguine on the back of that, and I think this is what Sanguine can do in the early game that's really strong as well, too. Not giving up on another potential kill over there in the long lane just because they got the one topside on the back of those ultimates. Still able to find Guy J hanging out near the tower line, really not expecting this ultimate. And Panatom's got to do more of this. He's still a little bit behind Scream on this Wukong, only level 5 to level 6. They really need this Thor to be the one setting the pace.
Yeah, Panatom's been doing a good job of just maintaining farm, especially considering the strong start Scream got off to. He's only about a half level down at this point. I'm looking at Snoopy now. He's got to try and rotate out of this lane or continue finding pressure here, but already we've seen he keeps moving up aggressive, but there's not really any follow-up from his team.
Snoopy trying to keep those beads for Netroid on cooldown if he can, but look at the Riptide over the wall from Wrong Q. That locks in Snoopy. Guy J tries to provide some peel with the Fields of Love, but Snoopy was in no man's land. There is no safety from there when that many people rotate over the left-hand side of the map, and yet again, Sanguine able to find a pick. Now ahead 3-1 in kills, even though the gold's still pretty close.
Yeah, Snoopy's playing with hot fire, right? This Ymir is such a just hot and cold pick. If you get off to a good early game, it's exactly as Aggro pointed out on the desk, he's going to be able to snowball the map, but he's also one of the mobile guardians in the game. If he gets caught out ever, he's just going to fall behind, and he's so easy to lock down, especially considering the draft that Sanguine have. Wrong view on this emoji. We've already seen what the ultimate's able to do to Snoopy. I mean, Netroid on Olarun, you don't even need Yamoja if he can't even move there. There's so much that Snoopy's going to have to play around, and he's going to have to play pretty close to perfect if he wants to find value on this Ymir pick.
Shinto's bees are down, but it's Panatom that takes to the sky. Good job using the ultimate from Snoopy for the CC immunity. Scream can't find the Tiger Stun on the back side of it, so a lot gets traded out. Most importantly are Shinto's beads, but the Anvil of Dawn being on cooldown as well is pretty big. I don't know, that little small skirmish with some help from Variety might have ended up favoring eUnited.
Yeah, they get a little bit of decent value out of it. And United's doing a good job of just playing the map at this point. They're able to farm up neutral objectives pretty easily. The mid camps have been going their way the majority of the time. And even looking at a 1-3 slash line for United, they've already established that they're not going to fall behind that easily. Sanguine, I think, are absolutely fine not coming into the lead at this point. I think that they're going to outscale United's draft come late game. And it seems like Sanguine have really gotten back to their own versatile style. They're playing around that 20-minute mark. They put Panatom back on one of his comfort picks inside of Thor. Netroid playing a late game hyper carry means that once Sanguine get to that Voltron state at the 20-minute mark, they're going to have someone who's got reliable damage that they could just really allow to win the match for them. And they've got plenty of sustain and engage inside of Yarkor, Rongyu. This draft from Sanguine is looking really good.
It is strong, and as they often do, they just pick a lot of best-in-slot picks, don't they? The Amaterasu, I think, can make an argument for being the best solo laner, Olarun, and Yamoja certainly the best Guardian out there right now, so this is what Sanguine like to do, man. They like to pick just the best stuff you can play right now and then get to a point in the game when they can work as 5 and hopefully just play it better than you. On the eUnited side, though, Miff, in that same conversation, you and I have been talking about how we don't always know what eUnited's game plan is coming into things. We know Snoopy's going to be playing something a little different from everyone else, as is Scream, but you don't really know what they're going to look like as a cohesive team. This could be an important set for them up against a really strong team to kind of show us a little bit more solidity to that identity.
I agree, but even then, this draft from United is so wildly different from anything else we've seen from them.
Yeah, he knew Snoopy was the target, locking him down easily, and the wall obviously not going to save him. Hurlwind gets almost no value out of the grasp of death, and yet again, when Panatom is deciding to ult, they've been able to convert it into kills. 2-0-1 throughout this early game, though still behind Scream on the Wukong.
I mean, Snoopy's having a rough go of it, isn't he? I mean, that's what you're playing with when you lock in the Ymir. It's not a very high win rate god, and I think there is a lot of high end to him. But so far, it's just shown that the SPL at this caliber of play, when you're playing a god like Ymir, they're going to absolutely, anybody it is, Sanguine, Ghost, it doesn't matter, SSG, they're going to put all their resources into making sure that you get shut down in the early. And Ymir from behind, he's only 1 level down right now, another level, maybe 2 more levels from now. If he falls that far behind, he's going to be absolutely valueless in every single engagement. It's not looking good right now. Snoopy needs to really start farming up, make sure he's able to rotate into these team fights from even. And it seems like he's just playing a little bit too far up for the rest of his team's liking. Notice every single time he gets caught out, it takes a little bit for the rest of eUnited to even group up around him.
And you knew this is how Snoopy was going to play, right? He's got the Traveler shoes, so he's certainly looking to rotate around the map and be involved with an extra movement speed. He's got the Blink as opposed to a more defensive relic, so once he's in the CC chain, he's got no hopes of getting out of it. Obviously, he's got the Shards of Ice for CC immunity ahead of the CC happening, but not once he's already in it. So Snoopy knew he was going to be walking this tightrope, so I'm imagining that obviously you don't want your Ymir to be 0-3, but this is probably not too far outside of what they were thinking. He was going to be on the tightrope on this Ymir pick, and he played into it here, even with the way that he's itemized so far.
And I guess it's kind of nice for the rest of eUnited having him be that lightning rod for all of the aggression. Right. It's allowing the rest of his team to farm up a little bit more safely. I mean, Hurrywin falling slightly behind in mid, likely because Shinto's just picking up a couple kills off of Snoopy. But it's going all right so far, and it seems like Sanguine's only ever really willing to fight wherever Snoopy is. So as long as he's playing well around the map and he doesn't fall too far behind, it doesn't really matter what his slash line looks like at the end of the day.
And they're burning it quickly. It's easy to forget, I think, how much Merlin can add to your Gold Fury DPS. Also having Netroid there in the Ola run does not hurt once he hits the stem. That's an early Gold Fury for Sanguine. Now things starting to look a little bit scarier if you're eUnited, because you were already only kind of, just holding even throughout the early into a pretty scary late game comp. But now Sanguine's starting to get some objective control to go along with it.
It's looking really good for Sanguine. I mean, again, to call back to what Aggro said, if eUnited comes into the mid-game with a lead, they're looking good. They haven't quite established that yet.
Guy J, there's nowhere for you to dash to. This is a great ultimate from Wrong Q. The Field of Love just came out from, I think he maybe thought it was the 1v1, but Scream and Hurwind are here. eUnited absolutely need to get something on the back of this. Hurwind shuts down Netroid first off, and there is the ultimate from Scream to try and close the gap, but Wrong Q with the Riptide able to reposition, so it ends up being a 1-for-1 Hunter for Hunter. Still though, who would you say this ends up favored?
It depends of whether or not Panatom's able to get away with a little bit of a cheeky steal, which he is. So it's a 1-for-1 Hunter for Hunter. I mean, it goes well for Sanguine. They play the map really well across. I mean, instead of rotating Shinto towards that lane, Shinto was able to farm up his own back camps. Panatom moves into the enemy back camps. So while eUnited's doing damage control, trying to make sure that they don't go down 1-for-0, Sanguine's farming up the rest of the map and putting their team ahead. I got to give that one to Sanguine.
Not too bad for Sanguine there at all, as they continue to hold on to about, not quite, a 2,000 gold lead. And the experience, not crazy in their favor. Certainly Wrong You with Snoopy is towards their benefit, but Scream a little bit ahead of Panatom elsewhere to keep things balanced down. So Sanguine have a small lead, but it's nothing ridiculous. Certainly not out of reach for United here by any means, but a little bit scary when you consider how much they're going to be reliant on the team fight phase this eUnited comp, but using all of this large CC together, like the Grasp of Death and Stygian Torment and the Fields of Love. If Sanguine come in ahead enough, it might not even matter how good those tools are.
And it's because eUnited's draft is inherently lacking on a bit of damage. They really didn't itemize or draft towards damage in their picks. A lot of it's lacking out of the jungle role. Sun Wukong does have fantastic engage, survivability, all the things we were hailing for him earlier, but his damage output is never going to match what Thor's is doing. I mean, even with a 1-level lead in favor of Scream, and he's itemizing more so towards that damage through Brawler's Beat Stick, a little bit of anti-heal and penetration. We're at a state of parity in the jungler builds, but Panatom having a global ultimate and just straight up Thor damage is going to outscale. They need eUnited, that is, to get a little bit further ahead. I think it's going to come down to this next Gold Fury. If Sanguine get away with an Oni Fury right here, they're going to pull so far ahead that they can literally just look for a team fight anywhere on the map and should just be already outscaling what eUnited brought to the table.
And remember, this is also an eUnited team that has gone through some shakeups. Snoopy moving over to the support role, adding GuyJ in. It's Snoopy maybe catching some trouble in the jungle. It's Shinto that's able to find the kill credit for that. But this is exactly to my point, Miffle. It's not just that eUnited might be going into a bit of a tough mid to late game. It's that they're not quite as cohesive yet as this Sanguine squad are, so you already got to think their late-game team fights would be a little bit behind where Sanguine are just because they've had more time to work on it. As Panatom's ultimate doesn't find a lot there in mid, this could get scary for them quickly, especially because we haven't even seen Yarkor get involved. As Panatom hammers out of there, there's the ultimate from Rongu too, making it hard for Variety to escape. But Sanguine aren't getting aggressive just yet. Maybe I misspeak, as Yarkor is getting aggressive, looking for Whirlwind and cutting down the Persephone Knights.
What a clean rotation. All of that's afforded to them because immediately Panatom forces Hurrywind's Aegis. He loses out on the beads on the tail end. No defensive relics left and available to him. It trades out Panatom's ultimate and beads, but what did we see? We saw Variety try and move up and force out Panatom. He immediately disengages and then leaves Hurrywind high and dry in the center of the map. Sanguine absolutely abuse it perfectly and move on to the next objective. And we already talked about it. I mean, Merlin's gonna blow up just about anything he stands in front of. Pyromancer goes the way of Sanguine. Gold Fury spawning in 30 seconds. 3,000, almost 4,000 gold in the lead at the 15-minute mark. It's the exact opposite of what Aggro was calling for on the desk.
This has not been a great look so far here in this early game for eUnited. They've had a couple of really good responses. Think about that pick on GuyJ where they were able to rotate over and get a return kill there, but some of these troubles for Snoopy are starting to hurt them now. He's 0-4 throughout the early game, and obviously Sanguine have controlled the neutral objectives a little bit better in Pyro and Fury, but this next one could still be important. You already highlighted how important it was when things are a little bit closer before the picks and the Pyro, but obviously even more important here because if Sanguine grabbed this Oni Fury and even like one kill, then they'll start to move into a pretty good mid-game lead.
And it's already looking really good. I think really what it is, and you hit the nail on the head, eUnited's best play this game was a counter play. They counter-rotated in on a gank, but with the draft that they have and all the CC, really, this is a proactive team comp, but they've been forced into this counterplay position just because of the pace of the game, and now Sanguine are going to exploit the fact that they're so far ahead and try and force a fight around this Fury.
Snoopy has to be the one to step forward, but he ends up taking a lot of damage. But that's the River's Rebuke down without a ton of value, so maybe eUnited can feel bolstered. They've got their team fighting ultimates. There's the Grasp of Death, keeping Netroid and Rongu chained in, but Panatom goes to the sky, and that forces eUnited to step back a bit. Dunk doesn't find much of anything, but they peel the Fury again, but Variety steps forward with the Stygian Torment, gets the beads, and there's the Fields of Love. eUnited finally putting the big team fighting ultimates to work, but still they don't get anything. It's Snoopy that falls first. It's Whirlwind that's in trouble as Yarkor sticks to him. Scream moves into the backline. They're looking for Netroid, but he lives long enough to get some return damage as there's the wall stun as Panatom needs to move, but Variety close in, trying to find one more return kill. He looks for the spin, some more turnaround damage, and sets up for Shinto to get the kill into Scream, and now Variety stuck way too far forward, had to go deep for that kill earlier, but Yarkor can keep up the chase. Rongu has the stuns here for them as another slow comes in from the Yamoja, making it, what, a 4 for 2 overall, as I believe Snoopy has respawned, all in favor of Sanguine.
That's exactly what I was worried about for eUnited. They played that fight, eUnited that is, nearly perfectly. Once Snoopy found that 3-man freeze, I was like, okay, eUnited win this engagement, maybe they're going to swing the Oni Fury back, but they're lacking so much in damage that Sanguine immediately turned it on him, and Yarkor was left completely unabated in the backline, and look what he's doing to GuyJ. It's exactly what he did in that last team fight, just hitting whoever's in front of him. Forces out Hurrywind's ultimate as well. Things are going from bad to worse pretty quickly. 18 minutes in, 6,000 gold. Things are rough for eUnited.
It is, and it feels like they're having to commit a bit heavily to even get the return kills that we've seen them get here, Mifflin. Nothing is coming easily for eUnited in this game. And Sanguine started to come into their strongest point of the game in a really good position, up about 6,000 gold or so. They've swung the experience back in their favor with Yarkor and Shinto both having 2-level leads over their direct opposition. You can see they're both around the 5,000 mark in gold and experience in favor of Sanguine. So this is exactly where they love to be. They're in their perfect type of position heading into their best phase of the game.
And they've all hit their itemization power spikes. Netroid, who's been left alone for the largest portion of this game, already has Hekate. He's already got the Typhons, demonic grips available to him as well. If we thought Merlin objective shred was already pretty hard to deal with, now they've got Olarun just absolutely decimating anything they stand in front of. And it looks like they know it. They want to move on to the Fire Giant and force a fight. I think it's the right play, man.
Variety has already used the leap. There's the Stygian Torment that does pick up at least one. Wrong Hue gets pulled forward. Fields of Love is committed to get the kill, so it's support traded for solo laner. Panatom dunks, doesn't find much, and has to regroup. It's a 4-on-4, but eUnited have been pretty reliant on Variety, just as Sanguine have been reliant on Wrong Hue.
Almost every ultimate down. Scream's the only one left, as well as Netroid, Shinto. Obviously a stance switcher, doesn't really matter for him. I like what we're seeing though. Netroid's been so triggered disciplined on these ultimates. He's not using these sanctified fields the second fight start. A lot of times we see these Olaruns just kind of drop it the second an engagement begins, and then the enemy team will disengage. Instead, Netroid's waiting for a real commitment from eUnited to use his ultimate, and he's been doing it incredibly well. We saw it really only came out in that gold free fight after we saw Snoopy blink in and find the freeze, after Scream had already used his ultimate. Netroid's waiting so long, he's being so incredibly patient, that it's got to be shaking eUnited a little bit. They don't know when the right time to engage is.
Sanguine are able to find the Pyromancer, and as you said, eUnited have a difficult problem to solve in terms of this engage, Mifflin. It's not even so... I mean, it is obviously everything that you're saying, but part of it is that there's just so many big ultimates that that eUnited have to hold their breath for, right? You have to hold your breath about this sanctified field because you just can't fight into it. You have to hold your breath when Panatom goes up with the Anvil of Dawn, because if you overcommit, he's got one of the best counter initiation tools in the game in that ultimate. River's Rebuke does the same thing. Sanguine are able to act both proactively and counter-engage a little bit better than eUnited with all of these picks they've got on their side, and it's made it hard for eUnited to know when they can go in. Scream has the ultimate forced out and loses a bunch of HP, and we'll have to come back in the hard way as Sanguine are now starting to group back up around FG.
And their FG burn, not only is it Olarun, not only is it Merlin, but with that Amaterasu passive, it's gonna shred incredibly quickly. Scream can't return to base here because of the threat of Fire Giant. No ultimate available, 50% health. He's gonna have a very hard time. He needs the rest of eUnited to group up so that Scream can return to base, get himself healthy, buy some wards, get ready for this. But because eUnited's kind of split up on the map right now, he has to remain constantly there.
Those Cupid Hearts maybe can help a little bit with that. They do have that little bit of sustain to help out, but this Fire Giant myth is down to half. There's the River's Rebuke to cut things off, and Panatom in the sky to make sure they get the objective. Variety goes in for the Stygian Torment and must pay the ultimate price. Sanguine able to grab the pig. Good wall from Snoopy as he narrowly gets over it. That should save his life, but Sanguine now have the 5v4 with Fire Giant on all 5 members as they continue to surge down the right side.
And they're all completely healthy, and even what little damage they're going to take from this tower is going to get sustained up through this Yamoja. eUnited wasn't able to put up any defense around that Fire Giant and lose out on 1 life. This could result in a Phoenix.
Certainly a favorable position for Sanguine as they move forward. They don't have beads on their backline, though, which could be a problem, but look at Yarkor. He's keeping Whirlwind entirely out of the fight, so Guy J is almost all their damage. He steps forward with the Fields of Love, and that does keep Sanguine at bay for a moment, but now the next minion wave is here, they can move forward. Snoopy in the Shards of Ice does get another disengage as they manage to lock down Netroid. They get the Olarun, but Snoopy ends up paying for it as well. So now 4-on-4, and Sanguine's starting to hesitate. They're going to back. They have not reset after the Fire Giant, after all this fighting, so they've got some money to spend.
Man, what a beautiful wall from Snoopy. Separates Netroid from the rest of his team perfectly. 4 people on one side, 1 on the other. Falls very easily to the damage from Gaijay. It's a clean engagement, a clean defense, but it's going to take a lot more than that because the siege potential from Sanguine is so incredibly high. All the run is going to be absolutely blasting these towers. Wrong Yu, if he's allowed to do the exact same thing as what Snoopy did, he'll separate a fight perfectly. Shinto's going to be dropping AoE damage that's hard to get through, and Panatom and Yarkor are just initiation machines.
I don't know if eUnited realized how many members of Sanguine were here. Another really good ultimate coming out from Wrongyu, and that isolates 2 members. But they're not quite able to get Scream until Panatom dunks down with the Anvil of Dawn. Scream gonna have to sit down in a casket as Sanguine find one more. But where can they go after this? Perhaps just push down this left side, Mifflin. They've got the mini-wave nearby and tons of towers to collect.
Yeah, it's plenty of free gold left on the map. Sure, they're not too happy about letting that gold free go down, but a tier 1 and 2 tier 2s I'm sure will really make them feel a little bit better about it. And so far, Shinto's been largely untouched in these team fights. He's been allowed to play however he wants. I feel like we haven't been given enough credit. My man Slashline is 7, 1, and 3. He went for the Staff of Myrmidon. His damage output is going to be ludicrous every single time he goes into these fights. It's going to be so hard to deal with. And I don't know if you've noticed it as well, but eUnited's engagements have been completely reliant on Snoopy, even though they have gods like Cerberus. They've got Scream on Sun Wukong. It's almost always been Snoopy in there first, and he's almost always had to trade out his life. There's got to be some way that they can split up these team fights. Maybe Variety goes in, burns out some beads. Scream plays a little bit further back, play more defensively on these towers instead of giving Sanguine these fights in these neutral zones. Stop fighting around the jungle. You're already 12,000 gold down and 4 members of Sanguine have Fire Giant. Things aren't looking too good right now for eUnited. It's going to take nothing less than a miracle for them to defend on this next push.
It's tough. They don't have the low committal engage that Sanguine have, right? If Snoopy wants to engage, he largely has to walk all the way up into freeze range, or Variety has to get up, and it's pretty close for that Stygian Torment, right? It ends up leaving those 2 relatively vulnerable on the back, as opposed to like the River's Rebuke or the Sanctified Field for Wrongyu and Netroid, which can get it done from a larger distance. Even Panatom, it's such a strong engage that it can make up for how close he has to get, so maybe that part of the small advantage is Sanguine grab the Pyromancer. Looks like they're willing to play things a little bit slow, another minute until this next Fire Giant comes up Mifflin, which Sanguine will be sticking around to grab, and I do not think eUnited can afford to come out and try to contest. But Sanguine are starting to step forward now this next mini wave is here, so we'll see where it is they choose to group.
If they put a little bit of pressure on this side of the map, it's going to force eUnited to group up despite them not even having Fire Giant here, which is going to be very strong. But it seems like eUnited's not going to take the bait. Instead, they're going to try and see if they can spot someone out on the other side of the map. They already pinged onto Netroid. They know that he's isolated, but Netroid takes a little bit of a safer path, so he's going to get out of that one scot-free. eUnited really don't have any right moving up to this Fire Giant defense. They need to have that unofficial 6th man inside of this Phoenix to help them out in terms of damage. Sanguine should likely be able to get this largely for free. I don't imagine anyone from eUnited steps up to defend this Fire Giant. And it's a tough call to make considering how far behind they already are, how early in the game it is. And Sanguine playing slow, they love it. This is exactly what they want at all times. It's almost like the Sanguine victory lap. We got a huge lead, let's sit in this position for as long as we possibly can, or at least until Fire Giant respawns and then continue the push.
Playing things cautiously, certainly not a stranger to Sanguine, as they like to make sure they're putting themselves in the best position they can. Now, with Fire Giant on all 5 members, around the 27-minute mark, they can push down the right side. All 3 Phoenixes are exposed at this point, but eUnited has done a great job of pushing up the wave in left. It'll be a while before Sanguine can threaten that Phoenix, so it'll all be about this right side.
Wrongview's going to be the first one winning the ultimate.
Yeah, use the ultimate to try and lock them down early on. Panatom drops down into the back of the fight, has to deal with the grasp of death, but makes it out nicely. A little bit low in the middle of everything is Netroid. He got isolated inside the Phoenix range, but it ends up working. They're able to take care of that right side Phoenix easily either way. So Sanguine sent 3 members back on the right side. Panatom getting chased in the jungle, but he's out as well. Sanguine might have lost Netroid, but this is how they like to do things. Slow and steady, they'll take your Phoenix, trade a member, and just retreat on the back end of it.
I mean, I feel like that could have been mitigated. Netroid got left largely alone there. He's an immobile mage. You can't expect him to jump out the same way Yarkor can dash, Panatom can use his leap, Shinto as well. And instead, it seemed like they were willing to leave him behind. Sure, they do get the Phoenix, but it could have gone a little bit better for them had they played around each other. Now, Variety and Snoopy stepping up a little bit too far on this side of the map. Maybe they don't know how many people are there.
Yarkor goes right into the dazzling offense, but Shinto has been isolated on the top side, still living though as Heroin is the first one to drop, and Yarkor ends up falling in trade. Snoopy falls too. There's the big fields of love as Gaijay gets the double, but Rongyu able to put Variety down. Panatom, the last bit of damage they're holding on to as Netroid's not into the fight yet. A Scream goes into the ulted. Panatom tries to use the Riptide to escape, and it works. It might cost Rongyu his life though, but they keep Panatom alive as eUnited's able to step forward and find some pretty critical kills.
That was huge for eUnited, but I gotta give shouts to the boys in red. That use of Riptide by Panatom to avoid the majority of Scream's damage was amazing. He decides to go back in the opposite direction towards Gaijay to escape into his own tier 1 tower. I mean, that's a play that takes a lot of just knowledge of how this is gonna play out, what's gonna go down, and what abilities are available to them. Panatom played it incredibly well. eUnited played it just a little bit better as a squad, though, knowing that that was the best time for them to look for a fight as Sanguine try and disengage.
They were able to find a couple of kills, maybe get some relics on cooldown. That Aegis for Shinto is a long way off right now, which might be something for eUnited to use. They got to send Heroin over to push out those minions in right, since they did make it through. Get a little bit of damage in on the Titan, but once that right side Phoenix is up and the Titan starts to regen, that's not going to bother eUnited too much. Though, with Fire Giant only left on Panatom, that might slow down their push. I mean, we might be looking at another 3 minutes or so before we even see any action here. Sanguine probably going to want to slow down and wait on this next FG.
And that's been Sanguine's MO since the dawn of time. They love to take it slow. I'm sure they won't be looking for anything too aggressive, but if eUnited keep up the same positioning that they have been, the same aggressive playstyle, maybe Sanguine won't have to wait. Maybe eUnited just move up a little bit too far and give them an engagement. It seems like Sanguine's going to group up as 5 and see if anyone's willing to step out of their own base just a little bit too much. Instead, eUnited also going to take a more defensive approach. I'm surprised to see Sanguine this far up at this point.
Yeah, they're ready to siege with or without the Fire Giant. It's still on Panatom, obviously, and that's not nothing. Gives him some nice sustain and a little bit of extra damage if he's hitting onto the Titan. But we'll see how Sanguine want to use this time. eUnited are here for the defense and fully set up, but they want to use the pressure while there's fire minions over in right Mifflin to try and keep this defense of eUnited split up a little bit. If they can get this left side Phoenix, it'll be huge. There's the Rivers of Buke coming out for him. A good wall coming up from Snoopy to stop the damage as Variety moves in with the Stygian Torment. But he gets isolated. No one can follow up, and Variety dies cleanly. Snoopy in trouble as well. The front line for eUnited continues to melt underneath the pressure from Sanguine. That should be it for the left side Phoenix as well. Now will Sanguine continue to push? It looks like the call is a yes. Only 3 members here for eUnited to defend, and they don't have their best ultimates to try and stop them. Sanguine move right onto the Titan and start dropping the damage. First one is Shinto, and that's it for the game. eUnited can't defend, and Sanguine take game 1.
I literally blinked my eyes and that Titan was gone instantly. That Merlin damage was ridiculous. eUnited just step up a little bit too far again. It's these immobile Guardians jumping in. We see Cerberus jumps in on that Phoenix defense. Immediately, Netroid says, oh, your leap's down? Maybe Sanctified Field right here. And he just falls instantly. Snoopy gets caught by the tail end of it as well, and the rest of Sanguine jump on them. It just didn't work out this time. It seemed like eUnited was onto something. They had a certain strategy for that draft with all that CC, all that front line. It's just that their damage wasn't quite there even when they were able to find multi-man stun targets, multi-man freezes, fantastic walls. It just wasn't quite enough damage to make use of it.
Yeah, and Sanctified Field and Rivers of Buke are just nuts, right? I mean, it's one thing to say they're immobile on the leap in, but there's no one that can leave when that is what is waiting for you when you land, right? So those tools are too strong. They force an overcommit, and Sanguine are able to get game number 1. But what can eUnited do to bounce back? Maybe the desk will have some ideas.
Yeah, draft something a little bit more confirmable in the damage department, maybe, for eUnited. Exactly what we figured would happen kind of did happen there, where Shinto just sort of all this free damage rips through United's front line and not enough follow-up from the other side. So United go down 0-1 in this set on the back of some great plays from really everyone on Sanguine. I think they showed up in this set to fully put down eUnited, at least in game number 1. But honestly, Rongyu and Shinto aggro, I think maybe somehow stand a little bit above.
Agreed. I think that Rongyu in particular in the early game had a phenomenal performance on this Yemoja. That little Yemoja combo through the Alpha Harpy wall was absolutely filthy. But I say it all the time when it comes to Ymir. He's either going to be the reason you lose quickly or the reason you win quickly. And that was kind of what happened. Snoopy really just got bullied in this game, and you see the struggles of learning what you can get away with in support. I think that he was just caught overextended too many times and was punished too easily by Sanguine.
So, I hesitate to kind of stick with picks and bans too much here, but in an ideal world, I mean, you're eUnited. Obviously, you're not going to pass up on this Persephone. In your mind, is it maybe something outside of the Cupid that can lock down a little of this damage on a more consistent basis?
Maybe. I think it's the jungler selection as well. I just don't know how much I like Wukong, Persephone together, because Persephone's damage is really weird. She's not low damage by any stretch of the imagination. No. She does a lot of damage, but her damage is sporadic and bursty.
Right. Bursty,
and just, yeah, it's odd how you have to play this character at times to really get what you need out of it. And I think that Wukong is just a little bit too inconsistent in the damage department. That being said, I thought Scream played pretty well in this game. I just don't know how much I liked the synergy of the 3v3 core of what eUnited was running.
My God, the KDAs for Sanguine, pristine across the board. 4-1-10, 4-1-9. The 8-2-7, I think, really shines through there for Shinto as well. But I like the way that now you and the casters and now me reiterating are sort of wording it as we talked about eUnited and the lockdown potential they had. But just the team fight ultimates that Sanguine brought to the table that game, a River's Rebuke, a Sanctified Fields with confirmed damage on the back end of it, just way too difficult for eUnited to fight back into. So that, I think, aggro is kind of a return to the Sanguine that has not necessarily been missing, but has been dialed down a little bit since Phase 1, at least here in Phase 2. That was like a Sanguine game, I think, through and through.
Agreed, and I think that the way you put it right there was pretty good, in that their composition has had a lot of damage that you could get for free, a lot of CC, good team fight presence, and frankly, that team composition is just easier to execute than what eUnited picked for themselves. I feel like that maybe that's the direction eUnited should be going, is trying to go into these compositions that don't require you to have flawless positioning and flawless team fighting. Not to take any credit away from what Sanguine's doing, none whatsoever. It's just gods like Ymir, Wukong Jungle, Persephone as well. I mean, these are gods that you have to really be on top of your game, and right now, clearly, eUnited is just not.
Yeah, they sure didn't make it easy on themselves there in game number 1. Let's see if picks and bans maybe improve for eUnited for game number 2. Sanguine sort of ran away with things there. I remember the kind of topic of conversation was you get Persephone, which is great, but you immediately give up Olarun and Yemoja, which is just so heavy, I think, for eUnited to let sway to the other side. So maybe strategy plays a little bit different here. eUnited still in that first pick slot, Sanguine still in that second pick slot, so could theoretically see the same priority here. Freya taken away. Serket as well. I was wondering if that was going to be something that maybe bites Sanguine, but I guess if nothing else, it takes something great away from Scream, and also opens up the door for one more of those power picks through to that second pick phase.
Agreed. I think that normally it's first pick that gets these throwaway bans, a little bit more targeted on what the enemy team might want to pick more so than the overall meta, quote unquote. But clearly Sanguine is willing to trade 2 strong gods for 1 extra strong god on the other side. Is kind of the way that they're thinking about it. And for good reason. I think that now you're in a really awkward spot. And this is what always happens when you're a team that is in first pick position, gets a pick that is normally thought of as not an auto win, but the strongest available pick, and then you lose with it. It makes it really, really awkward in the subsequent picks and bans, because now the threat that you had of, oh man, we're going to pick Persephone, watch out, you can't let us have that, is now out the window, right. And you're giving Sanguine multiple strong picks. So now they decide to ban Yemoja, and now we're going to leave open Cthulhu Olarun instead if they go Persephone again. I think personally, I would have banned Cthulhu instead of the Nemesis, and then banned Yamoja anyways. I'm surprised that eUnited's willing to give up that Cthulhu to Yarkor, who's looked really strong on this pick, but maybe they've got a plan to try and counteract it. I think Obey came in today with a plan to beat Cthulhu. It didn't work, but I could see the wheels turning. We'll see if eUnited has come up with a strategy similar.
Takes a lot to burn down a Cthulhu. We have seen it. You know, once upon a time, we have seen these Cthulhus kind of work down. It takes pretty concerted effort there. But Cthulhu Olrun perfectly predicted there, though it seemed like the writing was a bit on the wall. eUnited still had the availability to kind of pick into that Amaterasu, which is sort of the answer that we started to see rise rather, out of that solo lane. Rom, I think maybe a good change here out of the solo, or the long lane, excuse me. A little extra confirmable damage there for GuyJ. So a good start, all things considered, for eUnited, but the scales, I think, still tipping aggro heavily towards Sanguine with the first two.
Agreed. I think that they're going to be pretty happy with what they have, because, again, it's just team fight gods that have team fight ultimates that are going to be really hard to beat. eUnited maybe flexing with this Wukong pick, not exactly sure where that's going to go. Can I give themselves the option? They did the same thing with that Cerberus in this slot in Game 1. We've seen Variety play a lot of Wukong so far this year, so would not surprise me at all to see that go into the short lane. Could still go into the jungle for Scream again, but I would certainly like to see that go to Variety.
I mean, we're kind of in run-back territory here. I mean, Rom instead of the Cupid, obviously, but Sanguine, I think, are going to be perfectly happy to take that. It's an interesting perspective, though, when it's the first pick team, you're fresh off a loss, and you sort of bring back the same picks that you had from the first game. In your mind, does that kind of lend itself as a, well, we know this can work, just throw out Game 1 and maybe try it again? I mean, do you think something needs to change, or are you okay with eUnited going with something very similar in their draft here for Game 2?
I think as long as we stay away from the Ymir, we're going to be in a pretty good spot.
Okay.
I think that the adjustments that they have made, even though it isn't to their own draft, but in the bans they've gone for, taking away Wrong Use Umoja and now Shinto's Merlin, those are critical for taking away what Sanguine was able to do to them. So I like those selections already. I think that they have gone pretty smart with the bans. We have to wait and see what they pick in the last two, but so far, I'm okay with the level of adjustment they've made.
I'm curious, the priority of Sun Wukong over this Amaterasu. Wonder if maybe they could have gotten that anyway later on in the draft with jungle and solo already picked up for Sanguine, though it would have had to survive the ban phase as well. And neither here nor there, so something different for eUnited out of the solo lane for Variety. Looks like, for the moment, it's going to be an Osiris as a Horus in the meantime, locked in for Sanguine. So you do lose some teamfight potential, and some is an understatement in that Umoja. But now you've brought in a Horus. Wrong U looks incredible on Horus as well. Sanguine continuing aggro, a high-pressure draft.
Yeah, this is interesting here with what eUnited's doing in response and picking up this Osiris. It could be Osiris support, or excuse me, Osiris solo, or jungle. We've seen Sino run Osiris jungle. I think that, again, I'm a little bit worried for eUnited. They're a little bit CC light in comparison to what they had last game, but a little bit more damage coming out of the solo lane in the way of this Osiris. A little bit more consistent damage from the Rom as well in comparison to the Cupid. I think that eUnited's draft looks better with the Khepri in particular instead of the Ymir, but I just don't see how they handle this Cthulhu. I mean, is the game plan to just ignore him and run away?
Right.
That might work. I don't know. It just feels like they aren't coming in with a plan to deal with that Cthulhu. Maybe someone will pick up a Sunder, something like that, to try and help them out. That's certainly possible. But I'm a little bit worried about how well they'll be able to handle this Cthulhu and where this Wukong Osiris are going to end up going. But it's a different strategy if that is Osiris solo to try and deal with Cthulhu, is just jam as much pressure as possible and not worry about trying to out-team fight him. I think that is a viable option to try and experiment with.
Cthulhu is in that objective burn territory. Do eUnited have enough to burn him down? We'll have to wait and see as we head into game number 2.
Thanks again on the desk. Still Finch and Mifflin here, joined by Doug, as always, bringing us the Spectator. And Miff, some good adjustments here from eUnited this time. They don't have to worry about the Amaterasu, the Umoja, or the Merlin. And those are some pretty hefty gods to have taken out of the equation here this time. Has eUnited set themselves up into a better spot here, or do Sanguine still have enough to get the job done?
It's hard to say because, sure, they got rid of all those picks, but what did they leave open? Shinto's on Hebo, one of the best late-game hyper carries. Yarkor is now, instead of on Ama, is going to be looking on to be on Cthulhu, who's going to absolutely decimate late-game team fights. I think eUnited now has to win the game before Sanguine was allowed to group up as 5, just because of how much threat Cthulhu and Olarun bring together. It seems like when either of these gods are on the team, we have to play around each of these individual ultimates. If Olarun's ultimate's up, we probably won't be able to win a team fight. If Cthulhu ultimate's up, we probably won't be able to win a team fight. But now they have both inside of Sanguine. It's really hard to deal with. It's almost like you were saying last game where they just had so many tools that Sanguine could just either disengage or engage themselves with. They brought the exact same and potentially even better tools into game 2.
Snoopy moves up quickly with the abduct, but he's the one that ends up taking most of the damage. But he does hit level 2 first. You heard Hindu, and I believe you were part of it, talk about these level 2 starts. As Snoopy is going to fall for first blood. We don't get a chance to talk about the SPL waiting room because Sanguine are already starting things off, and now they've gotten the beads out of GuyJ's, who's still not level 2, which means they can keep up the pressure. Scream getting bullied a bit there in mid, but GuyJ's the one that's in trouble. They want the second kill as well, and Sanguine's dual lane get 2 kills to start things off.
Oh man, my heart's going
That's
out
bad.
to United, bro. That's 2 times in a row that Snoopy just kind of overextends in the early game. It just loses out on pressure. They should have been able to fight in with this draft that they have. I mean, Rom and Kepri, if they both make it to level 2, pressure should have been to eUnited, but now Sanguine have a very commanding lead. Estroid's level 3 already.
Yeah.
GuyJ's still level 1. I mean, good luck. I mean, Ring of Akate is going to get finished almost instantly. Rongyu is going to be able to rotate out a lane pretty early on. I'm thinking around 4 minutes. They're both going to be taken over to level 5. eUnited, man, this duo lane's got to clean up.
That's so tough. I mean, when you ban away the Yamoja, you've got to be thinking you've got a shot at dual lane pressure. Finally, we don't have to worry about all these rip ties over the walls and River's Rebukes and 6 stuns and CC chains, but instead, the Horus, just through sheer pressure in terms of damage output and potential for early game control, Sanguine has found it an entirely different way this time by stepping on the gas pedal themselves. eUnited already digging themselves a bit of a hole here with the way they started in the long lane, and there might even be more pressure coming as Variety getting ganked early. Panatom and Yarkor working together to get a 3rd kill on the board. This is Sanguine showing us another gear in the early game.
And it looks like the invade attempt is going to continue on through Sanguine. I mean, eUnited can't step up. GuyJ doesn't have beads. Sure, we still maintain the shell on a Snoopy, but things aren't looking good. They have to let this go or potentially just hope that Kepri's able to steal.
Scream making the rotation, that could be big. Netroid ends up using beads, so that's not for nothing. When they like to go get that purple buff aggression, not only were they unable to grab it themselves, but they're able to force those beads out. So that's certainly something for eUnited to help stem the bleeding. But can Wukong come over and capitalize on those beads being down the same way some of those other aggressive junglers could? I'm not so sure. We're going to see how Sanguine can use it.
Yeah, Wukong has to catch them unaware. It's not like a Thor dunk. It's not like you have Anvil of Dawn and you could just exploit the fact that beads are down from a distance. Scream's going to have to walk over, potentially through wards, potentially use his blink, and he's really, those beads being down aren't going to be a huge deal. The second Netroid ticks over to level 5, I'm not sure there's anything Scream can do about it. Sanctified Field's going to stop 72 transformations in its tracks, and he's just going to walk away for free. We might be looking at another game where Netroid's just kind of allowed to free farm.
That's what happened back in Game 1, as you were pointing out during the game itself, that Netroid was under next to no pressure all game long. Got to see if eUnited can find a way to get some kind of pressure going. Rongyu is down to about half HP over there on the left-hand side, which lowers things a bit more. As Variety is getting caught out, it's Yarkor who's level 5 first, which means Variety doesn't have an ult, and Panatom went to the sky. They want this kill. Ultimate just used to cut the distance, and Yarkor able to get the kill this time, as that's 4 unanswered for Sanguine at the beginning of the game.
Look, this is an argument that we've been having forever, you and I, Finch, that maybe Cthulhu is better in support because he can get involved in the early game, but putting him in a solo and allowing him to get this level of farm and then having Panatom essentially just play around that solo side of the map is going to mitigate the fact that the solo laner doesn't really get to get involved in the early. Well, Sanguine's just going to bring the fight over there and play around it, and it's afforded to them that opportunity because of that strong start inside their duo lane. Normally an Olarun would need a little bit of assistance to get through, but having a double kill first blood land over there means that Panatom really doesn't have to worry about Netrioid at all, so instead he can continue playing around the strongest piece on the map, which is this Cthulhu.
And they're going to be using this To The Skies ultimate. It won't be a surprise. Snoopy certainly sees it and should have an idea that they need to retreat, but they just land back in place. Doesn't end up being all that dramatic. In fact, Shinto has his beads forced out in middle lane, so a small win for eUnited. To The Skies is down, and they got the beads out from Shinto, and they really didn't have to use much at all. Looks like Scream used Blink in the middle lane to make that happen, but otherwise, I think eUnited still have to feel at least somewhat good about it, but now they're stepping up for a red buff invade. This is ambitious. They know Shinto's vulnerable, but there is that Sanctified Field. Able to get out of it is Snoopy, but he has to go topside to evade it, and now Panatom is here, and they go right for Whirlwind earlier. Good jobs using the Scarab's Blessing. That should allow Whirlwind to make it out of there, and they can turn back to its Netroid, who no longer has that Sanctified Field to keep him out of there. Scream able to find the kill with the Cudgel, but Snoopy now low on the back of it. This was a heavy commit, looking for that red buff invade, but wrong you blink it forward. Sets up for Shinto to get the kill into Snoopy, and Panatom still has his ultimate, doesn't find anything with the dunk as eUnited have to retreat.
That's a risky play from eUnited to be stepping up there, especially considering how this game's been going. I mean, the slash lines are 5-1 in favor of Sanguine. Sanguine have the gold lead as well. I think they were really relying on the damage coming out from Persephone being the one person who was slightly ahead going into that engagement. eUnited make it out arguably better off than they should have. They get away with the invade, they get a return kill, things are looking all right. Had Scream landed his ultimate onto Netrioid, it would have gone a lot smoother, but instead eUnited have to stick around a little bit longer on that engagement and weren't quite able to get as much as they could have. Maybe they would have been able to invade the mid camps, move to the oracles, but instead eUnited's overcommitment forces them to back up immediately afterward.
But still, I think I really like that call, because eUnited saw back in Game 1, Sanguine are not going to give you a lot of chances. If you can find a moment where you've got some pressure, where you saw To The Skies used, where you knew Shinto's beads were down, you have to try and use it. As To The Skies comes out again, they're looking for Gaijay over on left. There's the roll forced out from him already. Beads come out so that he can't get knocked up. But that does make Gaijay a little bit more vulnerable. We already talked about how easily Thor can capitalize when the beads are down.
It's going to be tough over there. Gaijay's walking a thin line. It doesn't even have to be Thor. If Netroid's left alone with him, Gaijay likely just loses the 1v1 now. That Sanctified Field is that important.
Good stun. Panatom gets stunned in the middle of trying to use the hammer there from Screen, using the Tiger Stun well. And the Grasp of Death connects as well. That's huge from Whirlwind. A big play that eUnited absolutely needed. Not just getting a pick, but onto Panatom and denying that jungler farm could be huge.
And now they have the aggressive positioning around the red buff. Scream moves up and loses half of his health.
And has to go into the ultimate right away. Shinto uses beads as well, but Scream can always re-engage. There's that dunk, but right up to follow it is the Sanctified Field. Great work from Gaijay, though, with the snipe. And there's the revive coming up from Snoopy. This is a much better team fight from eUnited, the best we've seen from them yet. But there's the dunk from Panatom onto 3, at the very least getting the return kill onto Scream. But now he's stuck in the middle of 3 of them, able to barely get out of there with that hammer and stay alive. But eUnited looking a lot better here in Game 2.
They really are. This aggression is so well placed from eUnited. Everything they're doing is calculated. First, they put pressure on a mid to open them up to move in towards that red buff. They find that TKO. Things are working out right now, and they're able to fight into this deficit. Sanguine have 2 options. They can continue trying to keep up this pace and match eUnited, or they can go back to that signature Sanguine playstyle of playing it out for the late game. They've already established a small lead for themselves. I'd be surprised to see Sanguine continue looking for these 50-50 engagements. Instead, I'd like to see them go back to just farming up the map, playing incredibly passively, and allow eUnited to try and claw their way back up themselves.
And this is that point in the game, Mifflin, where I feel like your argument for Cthulhu support looks the strongest. I mean, Wrong You, in a world where To The Skies gets, does get the beads out from Gaijay, but not a whole lot, then Horus is nowhere near as impactful in those fights a lot of other supports can be, especially if it had been Cthulhu over there. So during these mid-game fights, eUnited are looking to put pressure on the opposite side of the map, away from your core. They're not letting Sanguine fight around this Cthulhu until he's farmed up and rotating out.
But allowing this Cthulhu to farm up is a threat in of itself. I think eUnited have to shut down everyone else.
Wrong You goes into the To the Skies ultimate in response to the Grasp of Death, but it's for the retreat. Look at Yarkor rotating over, looking to see if he can get involved. eUnited wisely elected to disengage. They didn't have to worry about that potential rotation, but that goes to show some of that strength, right? If Yarkor does rotate over, then eUnited are already done with it, but Panatom coming over to right on top of a big old blue ward from eUnited, so Variety certainly knows it and should be able to play it safe.
At this point, it's going to be so hard for them to kill Variety. He's got the Phantom up available through his passive. He's got his ultimate.
And Wrong You in trouble. eUnited again playing aggressively up at Guy J, looking for the snipes and hits all three. That's Guy J, the newbie here for eUnited, finding the big time snipes, putting the scope on with the ROM from long distance.
Man, eUnited fighting on the enemy red buff might be eUnited at their absolute best. They haven't lost an engagement there a single time. Sanguine, just that small block of the map, maybe stop going there for it, because it hasn't worked out a single time.
You're right, for some reason there's some kind of passive buff up there for eUnited, looking a lot better on it, but I think that this team, I don't know, maybe they're one of the teams that's at their best when they get to play aggressive and try and catch the enemy team uncomfortable or off guard. eUnited have been looking great up there, kind of in between the tier 1 and the tier 2 and around that red buff. And with Guy J rotating over, this is what ROM can do, get some extra value from his ult. This Variety has to use his Lord of the Afterlife defensively to run away from your core, but allows them to get some value as Panatom's going to dunk in. They really want this kill into Variety, and they're going to get it with those two ultimates. I don't know if anybody can get away.
Man, Mercury, maybe Sonic Boom to the end of time, maybe a different Thor goes up at the end to escape, because just the knockups and the ability for Yarkor to never have to let go of that W key and continually find that CC is so insanely powerful on these engagements. Variety played it as well as he could have. He used his ultimate to escape the first knockup. He just keeps walking away. He wasn't juking poorly. It just didn't really matter. He didn't have any tools to escape from there. Now Pyromancer going to go to Sanguine for free. What are eUnited going to do? They're already grouped up around that gold free, but with Shinto and Netroid just kind of lurking in the jungle, I don't think eUnited can get away with it.
Yeah, does the team-wide buff that exists near red buff for eUnited come all the way down to Gold Fury, perhaps? We'll have our chance here to see, as really Netroid the only one on this side of the map to defend, but eUnited don't want the Fury. They're pushing up. They know where they're strongest. There's the blink engage from Scream, and Wrong Yu's low, but able to dash towards those minions and make it towards safety. And now, here comes the rotation. Panatom and Shinto are both on their way. There's the To the Skies, and Scream gets knocked up in the wrong direction, separated from the team. Does get that Scarab's Blessing on him, and Whirlwind has found the kill into Shinto. eUnited are particularly strong fighting in this spot. Yarkor is here, though. They've got the Sanctified Field as well, as Netroid gets the kill onto Scream, and they've got Variety isolated on the front of the fight, but he goes up and straight back down with that Lord of the Afterlife. He wants to stick onto Netroid, but Whirlwind has a big Yarkor-shaped problem to try and deal with in the form of that Cthulhu. Ends up taking care of Whirlwind as the backline is able to get that kill onto Netroid. There's the snipes from Guy J as he misses rarely as well. A big scattered fight happening all over the map.
Yeah, it was really that you can't stop Cthulhu, so just let Whirlwind die. You can't stop it from happening. Let's try and win the fight elsewhere. So the rest of eUnited, the 3 core members, push up into the team fight, are able to pick up Wrong You and Netroid, considering To the Skies and Sanctified Field were already used. That's the first time we've seen Yarkor able to rotate into one of those red buff invades, and it just wasn't enough. He gets value, he kills Whirlwind, but it wasn't enough to stop eUnited's push itself, and this lead is just continually shifting up and down. But so far, Sanguine has maintained just about 1,000 in their favor, but eUnited have shown that they don't care what the golden XP charts say. They're able to win these fights regardless.
They've been fighting really well and trying to limit Yarkor's value, since that's where the biggest experience deficit is in the game right now. But what's really sticking out for me here, Mifflin, is it feels like eUnited have all these second lives, right? They've got the Somersault Cloud for Scream on the Sun Wukong. They got the Scarab's Blessing for this Kepri. Whirlwind literally gets to keep fighting when he's dead because he's playing Persephone. Sanguine are having to work really hard to get someone who's dead to stay dead, it feels like.
Yeah, it's probably the most frustrating thing you can do is, oh, I killed them. Oh, no, I didn't kill them. The revive, the Somersault Cloud, as you pointed out. It's so hard to deal with because it allows eUnited to just elongate almost artificially these fights as long as they need to.
Whirlwind, great response with that Grasp of Death to avoid the CC, but Yarkor is up. And there's the dunk for Panatom. Whirlwind is the target, but he has dived far enough back to be able to survive. Sanguine couldn't collect the kill, and now it's eUnited's turn to re-engage, but you can't walk through the big Cthulhu damage, so he's keeping them at bay for now. But now that he's fallen back down, eUnited can step forward. They're heading towards the red buff pit where they're strongest. They're looking for Netroid. He's used the Sanctified Field, but it's not enough. GuyJ gets another kill and is able to shut down one.
This red buff invade, man, it's actually crazy that every single fight United is taking is originating right there, and Sanguine keeps giving it to them. They haven't been able to set up a defensive positioning. They're almost always on the back foot. United's at the red buff first every single time, and then Sanguine tries to fight their way back in, and it hasn't worked out just yet. That gold lead we were talking about earlier, it's gone. United is right there in the driver's seat, and they can continue doing so because of that, as you said, second life on just about every single one of their gods.
They are given all this sort of credence to be aggressive that they didn't have last game. Remember how punished eUnited were when they were engaging up forward, when the River's Rebuke would come down and lock them down, or when the Sanctified Field would lock them down. But this time eUnited are almost saying they just don't care about all that aggression, and GuyJ has played so well. 4-1-3 on this ROM pick, hitting the snipes from long distance, able to find his presence in these team fights. This has been much, much better from eUnited here in Game 2. They've actually got the gold lead right now.
Yeah, it's looking at it, especially considering GuyJ is 2 levels up after getting double kill first blooded on the first wave. That's crazy to think about. He had no right performing.
In fact, the
this
whole duel
well,
lane is
especially
behind.
Start. Yeah, things aren't going well for Sanguine right now, but even then, the whole strategy of Sanguine's draft is that 5-on-5 engagement. Once we can see them Voltron together, have Yarkor and Netroid standing next to each other, that's when this dive-centric composition with this strategy from eUnited to just run at the backline is really going to put through its paces. I'm worried about how well they're going to be able to deal with it once they engage. If Netroid drops Sanctified Field, they're going to have to disengage after that. Then the re-engage comes through, Cthulhu channels his ultimate, they'll have to disengage again. How many tools does eUnited really have to work with once Sanguine is really all together as 5?
And it's really diminishing the value, I feel like, of the Sanctified Field this game, because Netroid's having to use it defensively so often, and the member they isolate is not guaranteed dead. And as you said, we have not yet seen the full 5-on-5, so it might be a bit hard to evaluate how the late game's going to look, but you can tell how eUnited's feeling. They're the ones pulling the Pyromancer and looking to zone. This is their part of the game. They take the Pyromancer, and Shinto could be in some trouble here in the middle lane. Able to get back under the tier 1, do a little bit of peel, has been hit by the Grasp of Death, but this is certainly not doom and gloom for Sanguine yet. They're still feeling confident because Yarkor still has his ultimate. Decent poke from Panatom, and eUnited start to fall back a bit. Not enough to isolate the Sanguine boys there.
And there's not much to fight over either. If they really wanted to commit themselves to an engage, they really only get the tier 1 tower off of it. I like this play from United. Slow, methodical. They're trying to really slow down that pace they had established at the red buff because they're starting to get to that late game phase. They can't continually just send 5 members there because now Sanguine's starting to group up. They're going to have to choose their fights a little bit more intelligently, and I think it's really going to come down to this next gold 3. Oni Fury spawning in the next 20 seconds. They have to have Sanguine, that is, all 5 members there. They can't continually allow eUnited to get the aggressive positioning and then slowly stagger themselves in there. They need to meet eUnited's 5-on-5 with their own 5.
They've got 2 artillery cannons as their backline for Sanguine, so that's why I think you're prefacing this teamfight stage so heavily. When Shinto and Netroid get some frontline and they've got a little bit of setup for them to hit off a couple of abilities, that's when things are going to look different. United have instead been kind of running over them and making great use of their extra lives in these engagements, so can Sanguine burn through all of that becomes the question. Oni Fury is now up. Keep an eye on the Scarab's Blessing in particular and where Snoopy chooses to use it, as already there's been some trouble for Variety, but it's wrong you that pops instantly. A big fight for eUnited, but there's extra life number 1. Scream up to the sky with that somersault cloud able to live. They drop down the River's Rebuke, and they do have Variety isolated. He doesn't get any help. Scarab's Blessing put onto GuyJ, so they just target swap over to Whirlwind, and Shinto buying time with the Aegis still ends up falling to GuyJ, who's able to hit the shots, hasn't missed all game, but the second that he lands, Yarkor is there, but GuyJ pops him for the double kill. What about the rookie? Stepping up big for eUnited. Here is Scream. Gets the cudgel on the Panatom. We said the Oni Fury fight would be huge. Well, it's eUnited that's winning it.
Guy J changed the face of that fight completely when he was able to kill Shinto with his ultimate. Shinto was already starting to channel his third ability on a Scream. It would have killed Scream and likely healed him enough to continue fighting forward, but Guy J stops it in his tracks and then immediately turns his attention for the double kill. He did it all himself, man. That was perfect play from the ROM, and it locks them into the Oni Free, wins them the engagement, and now eUnited are looking very crispy coming into that mid-game start. They can go to the Fire Giant, they can try and force down these Tier 1 towers. They have an absolute lead, and it's looking incredibly strong. We've seen now what Sanguine's able to do as a full 5 stack, and it wasn't able to stand up to what eUnited brought.
And I think we're seeing some struggles for Wrong-Yu here as well, Mifflin. Nowhere near as impactful on this Horus as he was in the emoji. He's dying too quickly, and look at the recognition from eUnited. They're ready to start up the Fire Giant, and really only Wrong-Yu is nearby to stop it. Panatom is on the way, but he doesn't have the ultimate, so eUnited drop it for a second, halt the DPS, and look for the pick on the Wrong-Yu. The Abduct pulls him into his death, and Whirlwind gets another kill. eUnited looking much better this time around, but into the backline goes Panatom, deletes Whirlwind off the map, so it's 1-for-1 support. Traded out for mid, but only our core can turn into Cthulhu, into the Eldritch God, as he takes to the sky. They keep the rest of eUnited at bay. Sanguine have to fall back. They have to regroup, but they've done enough, Mifflin, to defend the Fire Giant.
Not only defend Fire, but also take a Tier 1 and 2 on the duo side. Netroid was just allowed to push it up, and he gets himself so much gold. He returns to base, finishes off the Demonic, gets a Tier 2 ring, is able to just completely get himself to level 20, and that was what Sanguine was able to do as 4 members. That was the best looking fight they were able to get. I think a lot of it is afforded to them through some strategic feeding through Wrong-Yu. A lot of eUnited's tools were immediately used on the support. Yarkor shows up, says, "Oh, word, you guys don't have any abilities left? Maybe I knock you up 5 times real quick." Maybe Shinto comes through, cleans you up with a little bit of damage, and it just works out in their favor. It was looking like eUnited was going to run away with that lead, but Sanguine closed it up instantly, and now they can start to group up around this Fire Giant and take an even fight.
It's a huge play from Sanguine, and again, I think the difference is that they were able to kill Whirlwind with a clean pick. How many other times this game has Sanguine gotten to get a clean kill on a priority target? As another skirmish is happening up near the alcove that eUnited owns, but is this the phase of the game where it's going to work? Scream takes a ton of damage and has to retreat. Can't get greedy for the red buff invade this time, as Sanguine able to defend and push eUnited back. But for me, the difference is how well Snoopy's able to use this Scarab's Blessing.
Yeah, this Scarab's Blessing is coming into huge play, and it's really what is stopping the engage from Sanguine. It's stopping the pressure from following through. If you get 1 kill, that's huge. It's able to completely turn the tide of a fight, but when it's Scream going up into the air, that taking up all your damage and then healing it up on its own, or if it's Snoopy finding a Scarab's Blessing, or it's you kill Hurrywin first, but he's still able to maintain his presence in the 5-on-5 engagement, these things are really hard to deal with. It makes it a very tricky mathematical situation for Sanguine to figure out whether or not they're actually winning a fight despite getting kills.
It might seem like you're winning, but suddenly eUnited's still around. Variety starts things off, but it's Panatom who's low. Hammer allows him to get back over the wall. Still okay, but Scream is a man on a mission, using the Somersault Cloud aggressively as he continues to chase out Scream. Meanwhile, Sanguine are pushing forward. Sanctified Field and the ultimate from Cthulhu used at once to push eUnited back. Now Scream rejoins the fight. He successfully pushed Panatom out, but maybe they could have made more if he was able to rejoin the fight sooner.
It may be, and now he uses his ultimate, but Panatom maintains his, so if eUnited stick around a little bit too long around this Fire Giant, they might lose out on the fight.
That certainly could be what they'll lose out on, as it looks like we're working on getting everything in order for getting us back into the game. We'll work on that here for just a moment. But Miff, this is a much better eUnited that we're seeing here in Game 2, isn't it? I mean, I think a lot of it is composition, not having to deal with the Ama, the Yamoja, the Merlin is making things easier and not giving Sanguine free objectives. But now that they're here to this late game where Sanguine's strongest, what do they have to do to hold on and make sure they're able to convert this into a dub?
I was born in the dankest of streams.
holding on, buying a little bit of time, trying to push up some minion waves, and then moving in towards these objectives to look to see if they can start the fight. But Sanguine aren't moving towards the Fire Giant at all. They're pushing forward in the mid lane, burning down the tier 1 tower, and grouping up in other spots. Looks like it'll be a moment, though. As things slow down for a second, though, we're right back into it. Sanguine going to fall back, though, not looking to push any further forward in the mid lane for now.
That's a huge pickup inside that mid tower. Now, if Sanguine do get the aggressive positioning around fire, they're able to force eUnited back. There's nowhere really that eUnited can run to quickly. All tier 1 towers are down. I think it really is a huge pickup. And now Sanguine have a little bit of a gold lead that they can work with. And we've already seen that with their drafts. Sanguine's picks are really good on the siege, and it's afforded to them through that Sanctified Field, through Yarkor on this Cthulhu. If they want to, they can continue to try and take fights around enemy objective towers instead of taking these jungle fights where it seems like eUnited's is slightly favored, mainly because of that Persephone ultimate just absolutely running amok in the backline, or Scream and Variety able to separate the backliners and the frontliners. I think if Sanguine want to, and it might actually be a pretty good call, is to continue trying to force down these towers and force eUnited to group up as 5 right in front of them.
For all those towers going down to value as Yarkor starts to fight off. His ultimate has already bought some space. Panatom's gone up too, and Gaiji and Herwin are pretty stacked up. That means the Anvil of Dawn get hit both in the back of the fight and get the beads. There's the Sanctified Field. You're knocked up approximately forever as Netroid gets the very first kill of the engagement. Gaiji gonna follow up. He does get a pretty critical pick onto Shinto there as well, but that fight coming up basically all Sanguine as they're able to get the 2-for-1.
Absolutely enormous play, and the synergy there we saw from Netroid getting the knock-up from Rongyu inside the Sanctified Field. Panatom able to completely eviscerate the backline single-handedly. I mean, this is huge for Sanguine, and they're not going to Fire Giant. Instead, they're going to try and push down mid, and we see Scream doing the exact same thing on the right side of the map. It means that there's only 2 members left alive for eUnited to defend. This could be a Phoenix, but it seems like Yarkor is playing a little bit far back. Going to return to base and make sure he doesn't lose his own tier 2 tower.
I suppose so. Worried about Scream's presence over there alone in solo, so he backed. It means it's just 3 members of Sanguine pushed up, but they get the pick onto Gaiji and the pick onto Snoopy. Still a 2-for-1 in favor of Sanguine, but look at eUnited continuing to push up. Sanguine now finally a bit regrouped themselves with Yarkor, at least in the neighborhood, but looks like we'll have another moment to breathe here, Mifflin, as that was huge. I don't know if Herwin and Gaiji can ever stand that close to each other again. Panatom's going to hit that dunk every time.
I mean, and look what it cost them. It cost them the TKOs, it cost them a couple lives, and now both Hurrywin and Gaiji are going to be without beads and Aegis for at least another minute. Sanguine know that for an absolute fact. They can group up as 5 once their ultimates are re-up and just position themselves around Fire Giant and force eUnited to move into them. If Panatom finds another dunk, it doesn't have to be both this time. If he just gets 1, it's almost a guaranteed kill off of his damage alone. Meanwhile, we've already seen what Yarkor, Netroid, and Rongyu were able to do together when they're just stacked up on each other, and it's kind of filthy.
It is pretty difficult to deal with when you're knocked up for that long inside the Sanctified Field. And Sanguine understand that they've got all the pressure right now. They could afford to start up the objective. 35 seconds before the beads come back up. Even longer for the Aegis for the backline of eUnited. That's Herwind and Gaiji. Sanguine don't have the relics for Shinto either. Remember, he died as the only member of Sanguine to fall in that last fight. But the longer Sanguine wait here, the closer eUnited are to having everything back available. 20 seconds now on those beads coming back up, and only about 35 seconds, maybe a little bit more on the Aegises for eUnited. So Sanguine maybe missing a little bit of time here with this window.
Yeah, a lot of trepidation, not quite willing to pull the Fire Giant itself. They still got a little bit of a window, but those beads are already starting to come back up for those carries. I think Sanguine certainly missed a huge opportunity, and instead they're going to pull the Fire Giant now. This could be a bit of a misplay.
Waiting until they're up. Sanguine certainly can still win even with those up, obviously, but would have been much easier, one would imagine, when they were down. Sanguine fully give up on the Fire Giant. Grasp of Death does hit Netroid in the back of the fight. Yarkor uses his ultimate before he's got everyone locked down, but Panatom takes to the sky as well. They've got eUnited entirely pushed out of the Fire Giant pit. Variety comes back in because he doesn't know where the Fire Giant's at for now, wants to defend, recognizes he can back up, but taking so much damage from the actual Fire Giant ring itself. Beads come out from Shinto as Snoopy hits the Abduct, and Sanguine reset again.
But both carries from eUnited now have both their defensive relics up as well. Beads and Aegis on both Hurrywin and Gaiji, but Sanguine keep the Fire Giant relatively low, 20%.
They still have the Sanctified Fields. They drop that and confirm the Fire Giant. Into the backline goes Scream, but he has to use his ultimate instantly, barely able to make it out of there as Guy J goes up for the snipes. These can all hit, but Sanguine are out of there at this point, so the Guy J ultimate doesn't really get much value, but Sanguine are actually re-engaging. Scream is low, some key ultimates are down. Perhaps they're correctly recognizing they can make something happen here after all, as Panatom and Wrong Yu are back in range, but eUnited hidden behind the tier 2 and should be okay for now.
Variety stepping up there after the TP from Panatom stops him from finding the wall to separate Snoopy and Guy J. A bit of a micro play, but really does save the support's life, or at least keep Scarab's Blessing off cooldown. I mean, good play from United on the disengage. Just a little bit unfortunate that they weren't able to get into the Fire Giant on time. Now 5 strong with Fire Giant are Sanguine, and there's no towers standing between them and these Phoenixes. Their siege is powerful. I mean, Sanctified Field makes a siege easy on its own. Pair it with Cthulhu, I mean, all 5 members of eUnited are going to be standing right in front of them. The game simplifies at that point, as you're so apt on saying, and it really does make it much harder for eUnited to defend. Their defensive comp is a little bit weaker. Bone Rush is really the best ability they have to keep the minion waves out, and even then, Hurrywin's going to have to step up a little bit further than I would like him to have to. And the defensive dive potential of eUnited through Scream and Variety are going to take a huge hit now that Sanguine are able to stand up as 5 and push on one of these objectives.
Sanguine pushed forward though with the To the Skies ultimate. All 4 of them came through on it and got a ride right towards this fight with eUnited. This isn't on Phoenixes. This isn't near objectives. They're just brawling in the jungle. Big huge Sanctified Field locks down everybody from eUnited. Snoopy is the first one to fall. Into the backline goes Variety. He's got to get this kill on the Netroid, but there's too much sustain, too much peel, and Netroid able to live through all of it. Now eUnited on the back of a 0 for 2 have to retreat to their Phoenixes. Sanguine in an excellent spot now.
And Scream might be caught out here, forced to use the Aegis, loses his life to Shito. That might just be game. Sanguine's health bars are slightly low, but they've got plenty of healing. Wrongview and Netroid can keep the entire team popped off, or topped off, rather. Popped off might just be right as they start to approach this Titan. Hurrywin, no ultimate available, neither does Guy J. No relics available for this Persephone either. It's going to be a hard-fought battle. Might just be easy for Sanguine.
Guy J and Hurwin, the only ones that could defend, but Sanguine come barreling into the Titan room. They push the carries aside and dump all the damage onto the Titan. Sanguine are looking for the dub. Sanguine taking care of eUnited, and Sanguine get it done in 2 as they find another victory and bounce back after a tough last week.
It's crazy to me that Sanguine is the only team that's valuing Horus this highly. To the Skies just completely catches eUnited unaware in the jungle, almost as if their pants were down. I mean, that fight goes perfectly. Sanctified Field hits 4. I mean, I couldn't count the Cthulhu knockups, I'll be honest. There's way too many of them. And it just works out perfectly. Scream makes it out just barely, and then gets caught out by Shinto in the middle of the map. Clean play from Sanguine, but it really did look like eUnited might have been able to take it, especially around all those red buff invades.
That's right. eUnited, I think, have looked the strongest we've seen them here in Phase 2 with this new look, but you can't expect them to beat a team that's been together this long at their best stage of the game overnight. eUnited still improving, though, with a little bit more to go. We'll get it back to the desk, though, to get their thoughts on that exciting whole set.
And what we figured the weakest point of this eUnited team was the long lane actually kind of showed up here, mainly Guy J. Good performance on the ROM, not enough though to get eUnited the win over Sanguine. It is Dulcin and Aggro still to round out the day and round out this set. What do you see there in game number 2, Aggro, that gives Sanguine the advantage? This one's neck and neck for a while, but by the end of it, Sanguine found a good team fight.
If you just play enough team fights with both Cthulhu ult and Olorun ult, you'll win. Because those two have the potential to just outright win themselves team fights all alone. But when you combine them, it feels pretty much impossible. I agree with what you're saying, though. I mean, I thought that Snoopy had a really good game. He did die a bunch with ult up, which is obviously not ideal. But overall, had a much better performance on this Khepri than he did on the Ymir. Guy J had his best SPL game by a country mile. Definitely his most impact he's had in the game. I felt that Variety, even though he fell behind in farm, was still doing his job and frontlining on the Osiris. eUnited came in with a coherent game plan. They actually looked like they had a win condition this time around. It just so happened that Sanguine did Sanguine stuff and played really well towards the late game. Panatom in particular had so many massive Thor dunks, this one included, in this set. But, you know, with where eUnited has been, especially last week, here in Phase 2, just in total, I feel like having these late games just end up not going your way. There are worse ways to lose, especially against teams like Sanguine. And again, much like Obey, it's not where we can't be results oriented when a team is clearly this far behind right now. It's where the top of the league is. It's noticing improvements in the overall macro game. Are we understanding how the map is flowing? Are our picks and bans getting better? And I think that it's very, very fair to say that eUnited improved from last week to this week.
It's a yes for eUnited, a yes for Obey as well. Similarities between those teams on the standings on top of everything else. The gap between the top and the bottom closed a little bit by Sanguine here, but still stands true. If you're 4-0, you're up in the top 3 here. Everyone else either 2-2 or beneath that, again, by virtue of not having played one another up to this point. But that will change tomorrow morning. Aggro Ghost Gaming up against SSG to start off the day on Sunday. Sanguine back in action against the Knights to round out this week here in the SPL. Freest question of the day so far. What game are you excited about tomorrow?
That'd be Ghost Gaming versus Space Station Gaming. Got any more in the bag for me here, Dave? I mean, I know we're getting to the end, but I'm ready to go. I'm just getting so excited about that set already.
No, I agree. Undefeated teams. Who stands at the top at the end of it all? Tune in tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Time for the SPL. We'll be live with the SCC just prior to that, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. But on behalf of myself, Aggro, all the other casters, everyone back in production, thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Peach it.